You are listening to the Pencil and Paper Podcast Network.
I'm Katrina, and I love anime.
I'm Steven, and I'm aware of anime.
But what if that affection could rub off?
Perhaps that excitement in her eyes got me curious.
I could offer up some solid anime.
I could give them a watch, just to see what all the fuss is about.
And maybe, just maybe,
I could learn to love anime too.
Welcome to Inspired by a Weeaboo. Hello and welcome back to Inspired by a Weeaboo. I am your host, Katrina, and with me is my husband, Steven.
Hello.
We just finished episode 8 of Fullmetal Alchemist. Steven, what did you think?
Well, I noticed that for every seed that they plant, they pay it off pretty quick. Because I was asking about the serial killer last episode, and we get the serial killer. And I wasn't sure that was the serial killer at first, but I immediately questioned that person when they walked in with the food, because I was like, that's a dude. There was no question. The voice, even just the way the face looked, I was like, that's a dude. And I didn't want to be insensitive. It's like, is it a trans person or what? And I was waiting to see, but then thinking about it in the time, I was like, well, that wouldn't be all that common, back in early 2000s when this came out. And especially during the time period in which this takes place, which I think I'm starting to figure out.
Have you figured it out? Because I feel like they,
when they said Führer,
yep.
I was like, okay. So are we like in 1940s Germany, 1930s? Okay, well, that all adds up. I mean,
now, to clarify, the country that they are in is not Germany. However, the parallel to it is. So it's still Germany, but think of it as, I guess, kind of an alternate universe of Germany.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. But they called the Führer was the king guy.
Yes. Führer King Bradley.
Yeah. So as soon as they said that, I was like, what? Like my eyebrows raised, like, are they like Hitler? What? And then he said Führer King Bradley. And I was like, still, yes. But Führer.
Yes. He's not Hitler in, the sense of like, Hitler.
Right.
But he's one of those people that you kind of like him. He has charm. I will definitely say I do like Bradley to a point. Just like I like, other characters to a point. My two favorite characters are obviously Ed and Al. And outside of them, 100% would be Hughes and Colonel Armstrong, or Major Armstrong, which we haven't met yet. Okay. And I cannot fucking wait. I love Armstrong so much.
I like it's about the serial killer and getting to the bottom of that, and I like that Hughes and Ed kind of had a conversation trying to figure out the patterns and everything like that, and they, between the two of them, that's what I'm liking about their relationship. It's like between the two of them, they can figure things out, and they can work things out. And while they didn't quite connect the dots right then and there when they were discussing it, there were little elements that they were kind of tossing back and forth to each other. It's like, well, this doesn't seem to add up, and that's just not. They couldn't quite pick little details that they needed, like Ed had kind of pointed out. It's like, well, maybe they killed the body somewhere and then they moved it. And they're like, yeah, but we can't really quite figure that out because there's not the technology for it. But it's a possibility, but they're not 100% because there's no proof. So it was running with that little element to figure out, and then that's where you find the icebox truck. And then they start connecting those dots. And obviously we get to see Winry. She comes back, and that's what kind of sets off this chain of events, because she came to visit, and then she gets ensnared by the psychopath, and then he takes. Now, I will say that I got a little frustrated at Ed So he got kidnapped by the serial killer, and smartly, the serial killer was like, I'm taking your arm.
Yes.
And probably wouldn't have done that had he not gotten the information from a mouthy cook saying, oh, yeah, well, he can do alchemy without his hands. What about that?
Yeah.
But Ed, being very talented to be able to scrawl like a little circle with a screw.
Yeah, the transmutation circle.
I was like, wow, that's pretty good. But, kudos to him being able to do that. So he gets out. But there was the moment where he was trying to save Winry.
Yes.
And he was doing it with one arm after he'd already fought off this serial killer nut and already had been cut several times, I think, by this point. And he goes over there and he's doing that. And I'm like, dude, your arm's right there. Why? I mean, that should have been the first thing you did was grab your arm, pop it back in, and then rescue her.
Well, it's not as easy to just pop it back in because when that notch, like the joint goes into his shoulder, that's basically connecting every single nerve in his arm.
Yeah, I mean, they did make a point that it seemed painful, but still,
yes.
Get the arm. And then you can do, because of all the time that he spent trying to get her loose, he could have put the arm back on. He had the pain, and he could have at least tried to get her loose. And if the guy was already behind him, he could have been ready to go. I feel like within the time frame it took for him to go through the motions of the pain and the time that
but he's like a child.
I know. It was just like one little...
Like, he's still a little kid.
And, I mean, they do kind of definitely touch on that with this because, I mean, it took a toll on him. He was about to die. And he was literally about to kill this man before Al stepped in and stopped him from doing that. Yes. And that was another thing, too, that they brought up that I guess I hadn't really thought about, and they hadn't really showcased through any of the episodes thus far. But, yeah, Al does not have emotions. And
he does have emotions. If you have to pay attention to a point because there's parts where you can tell where he's kind of embarrassed, or like there's a scene in one of the other episodes we watched where you almost see like a blush come across his face. But there are other scenes, and there's more that you'll witness as it goes on where you actually can hear him crying, and he makes a point to point out that he's crying and he feels like that's what he's doing, but you can't see it.
Well, I guess in this regard, and I guess that was where I was a little taken aback by it, is he just seemed like he was fearless in that moment because nothing about it terrified him, especially after Ed had kind of struck him with his blade. He just was like, hey, this isn't going to kill me, dude. Like and you're right. I mean, there were other times where that embarrassment or just certain emotions have washed over him, but in that moment, he just seemed fearless.
Yeah.
Like he just, this is how it is.
I feel like that has a lot to do with the fact that they are both still very young, and this is they've been in fights before. But they've been in fights with people that they knew they could best. Mm-hmm. This is the first time that not only Ed was caught off guard, he literally had his arm removed, so he already had a massive handicap. And then as soon as he gets out of the chair, and even with, the pole that he has, the dude doesn't let up for a second.
Yeah.
And I can understand, especially a child who is, how old did we say? 12 now? Mm-hmm. Like, that would be utterly freaking terrifying because you kind of come in. I mean, he ran in there cocky. Even sitting in that chair, he was still cocky. But once it came down to it and he realized that this guy's not just going to go easy on him or anything like that, like he's going to kill him, that he just, like, you can't function. Like he said, he couldn't think of anything. He didn't know what to do. But I think that shows that's also why he needs the military, in a sense, not only as that backup, but as people who can get him used to it, and somebody who can also kind of hold his hand, because that is one thing with like Mustang. He's kind of like a big brother or an uncle
Okay.
towards the boys, but Hughes is like a father. Like that man, he loves those boys, and I feel like you can get the sense of the type of man he is just from the first interaction when he catches Edward on the train.
Mm-hmm.
Just the way he talks to him. He acknowledges that he is a child. Where Mustang will acknowledge that Ed and Al are children when it benefits him, but any other time it's like, you need to handle this like an adult. This is how it is. This is how you have to be.
Right.
But Hughes takes the approach of they're still just children.
Mm-hmm. Mustang, that was another person I wanted to bring up. So we get to see Ed officially be named Fullmetal, and
Yes.
I'm assuming that all the other names that we've heard, like Mustang, that's their code name.
Yes.
Like he said, everyone gets assigned like a nickname, code
Well,
name, or whatever.
Mustang is actually his name.
So-
Roy Mustang is his actual name. His code name is the Flame Alchemist.
Gotcha.
Where
Okay.
like Tucker was the Sewing Life Alchemist. Colonel or Major Armstrong is the Strong Arm Alchemist. Like they have the different things that suit them, and Edward is the Fullmetal.
Gotcha. You mentioned in a previous episode that he does things in a way that could be questionable.
Yes.
And in this episode, when Ed comes to him, so did he officially, I guess I blinked and missed it. Did he drop out for a moment?
Yes.
Okay, so
When-
I don't know how I missed that, because I remember when he passed Scar on the street, he had mentioned, yeah, I put that behind me, but he was still with them in the I guess it was cafeteria or whatever, when he was talking with Hughes about the case. So I thought, well, maybe I misunderstood. Maybe he was just. So I guess I got confused because I don't remember seeing him turn in his.
Yeah, when him and Mustang are talking, and after Edward finds out he has to categorize Tucker's work and everything,
Mm-hmm.
and they're talking, Edward tells him that he doesn't want to do that. He wants to do, what he wants to do, but he doesn't want anything to do with, Tucker's stuff. And Roy tells him, you can do that, but leave the watch here. So that's what Edward ended up doing, was walking away, but obviously Mustang knew he was going to end up coming back.
Sure. So at the end, when Ed does go back for his watch and kind of sets terms and conditions, I also feel like those terms and conditions Mustang agreed to were also to his benefit as well, because he does have something over Ed now. It's like, well, if you want to go after the Philosopher's Stone, that's fine, but I can fuck you over just the same and tell people why you want to do it.
Yes.
And I don't like that, because now granted, without that, I can't imagine anybody would have just been like, yeah, sure, whatever. You know, so clearly he had to have a reason to allow that. So he has something to kind of use as insurance, if you will. But I don't know. Seems underhanded sometimes. I mean, I want to know what his... and it makes, if I say it this way, it makes it sound like he's villainous, but I guess I'm looking for what his true motive here is in taking them in, because I feel like he's got a reason, and it's not just because he sees something good in or promising in Ed. I feel like there's another layer to it. I haven't quite figured out what it is yet. That's just my assessment on how I see how he seems to be treating them, and even the fact that we got to see, who was it, that was the king that ran into Al when he was talking. And now see, he's another one, because he overheard Al asking about the Philosopher's Stone, and he was all fired just to be like, yeah, sure, this is where you can find all this information. Like, he's just setting it up.
Yeah.
And they have to have a reason. you know, and I don't know, there's some sneaky underhanded people and I don't like it. It's like, what are you up to? And it could just be something as simple as, hey, we need, you know, we've been looking for this, and if these people are crazy enough to go after it, and we don't have to worry about it, then what the hell? Let them go do it, and hopefully we'll benefit from it. You know, we can just keep tabs on them, and that's that. But I don't like it. Everybody seems like they've got a motive, and I want to trust some people, but I don't know. I don't like how they're handling it.
I guess you could look at the way that Mustang handles things, kind of like Batman.
Okay. Yeah.
Have a contingency plan for everything. There are very few people that Mustang trusts wholeheartedly. Very, very few.
Mm-hmm.
And Ed and Al aren't really in that category yet.
Yeah, I mean, clearly not. I mean, he just really met them. I mean, obviously some time has passed. We know this, but I mean, I wouldn't necessarily trust him either based on what you know of them.
Yeah.
I mean, if you knew that they had done something illegal and yet he's still allowing it to happen and just omitting those details,
mm-hmm.
That's why I feel like he's got motive. He's got reasons that he wants to use them and to his own end. And I know you've said he's not a bad guy per se, but I feel like had you not told me that, I'd be very, very, very suspicious of this guy right now because I just feel like everything he's doing is setting up for a bigger plot. And I just don't know what it is yet. But he seems like he has motive for something bigger, something grandiose that he could see them pulling off.
I mean, like the one guy who takes Edward and Al to Tucker's things, like he says, Colonel Mustang will do everything he can to achieve his goals. He'll do everything he can to climb that ladder so he can achieve his goals. But if his reasons were the reasons that, you know, if it was only for those reasons, then those people that are surrounding him would not follow him. Like, that's what his own men say, is like, they would not follow him because they know why he's doing what he's doing. Mm-hmm. They know why he makes those decisions. And they support it because they want the same thing he does.
All right, well, we'll see where it goes. But like I said, I'm weary of the man. So,
I mean, you have every right to be.
I want to trust him, but I don't know what he's up to.
I mean, it's really hard to trust anybody after, you know, the last few episodes we watched, because the first guy they came in, you know, touch with, the Mahjong guy, you know, he was a friend of their father's, and he turned out to be an utter piece of shit. And then Tucker, you know, was a State Alchemist, highly recommended, treated him, you know, like they were his sons, and then fucking basically murdered his own daughter. So it's really hard to distinguish who has good intentions and who doesn't. And there's so many of them that seem like they're very, very bad, but turn out to be pretty decent.
And see, with that logic, you would make me think that Hughes is going to turn on at some point, and that would just kill me. Because he has been very decent to you.
No, Hughes is a sweet baby boy.
Okay, well, I'd hate to see him turn to the dark side, especially with his wife and his kid and all that, because he's also proud of them, and we see.
Oh yes, that's like his trope. Mm-hmm. It's great, but yeah.
So, weebs, as usual, tell your friends, your family, whomever love anime to listen to the podcast on their favorite podcasting platform. They can also do it on YouTube, youtube.com/pencilpaperproductions. If you want to listen to them early, go to patreon.com/pencilpaperproductions. And if you just want to keep up with anything easier, bookmark pencilpaperproductions.com/inspired weeaboo, and you can always get your episodes. And, you know, it's easy peasy, lemon squeezy.
All right, my little weebs. Until next time.
This has been a Pencil and Paper Podcast Network production.